I'm Jordan.
And I'm Rosanna.
And on this podcast, we explore how to take life off autopilot
and relentlessly pursue a life worth living together. Hello, and welcome to Season 8, Episode 3 of the Relentless Pursuit podcast, The Other F Word, Part 2.
Part 2. The first part was so good, it needed a sequel. So before we get into that, we wanted to go ahead and ask you to take yourself to iTunes, leave us a 5-star rating and a review. We always feel like we benefit and are grateful for the ratings and reviews and feedback that we get from our listeners. And if you've already done that, thank you so much. If you don't mind sharing the Relentless Pursuit podcast or even this specific episode with someone that you also think might enjoy it.
All right.
So let's get into the F word. So we just published part 1, and we are co-publishing this episode along with it because there's a lot to say. So what is this other F word, and where are we going with it?
So the other F word that we're talking about is friendships. We have already talked about what friendship is, why it's necessary, myths regarding friendship, health benefits to friendship, but we are now focusing on just male and female friendships, kind of like the differences between them and a little bit more insight into how guys and girls view and work through friendship.
Yeah, and we also talked about in part 1 how this was a topic that we've put off for the first 7 seasons in a sense because we were, in some ways, we felt like we couldn't quite broach it just because of really like the status of friendship in our own lives to various extents. And I think this part 2, since we're going to focus on like just, you and me and the differences between like male and female relationships, I feel a little bit more of that hesitation, a little bit more of that vulnerability to talk about it.
You're getting a little nervous?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think there is something to be said about male and female friendships because they are quite different. Like even just you as a guy and me as a girl, the way we approach certain things are different. And obviously because we're different people. So obviously like every person's friendship and relationships are different. But when we look at the difference between guys and girls and maybe how they view friendship or how they act in friendships or what expectations are present, it is a little bit different. And then there are also kind of like 2 stigmas too that we're noticing amongst male and female friendships.
Yeah, and one of the things we also brought up in part 1 that I wanted to confirm too was that we're talking about friendship, but we're not talking about friendship with your spouse, because a lot of people, ourselves included, would say, yeah, I'm friends with my spouse, maybe even best friends with my spouse, but we're talking about people you're not married to in those friendships, because that's really the focus. That's really important.
Well, and then in this episode, we're really looking at too, like same-sex friendships, like a man's friendship with another man and a female's friendship with another female.
Yes. Yeah. And yeah, right, men and women are different. And if you look at, there's actually a lot of startling, commonalities between the way like a group of boys or a group of men acts, throughout different cultures and different times. And same thing with female relationships too. So there's just something to be said about making sure that you have friendships with people who are the same gender. So types of friendship, female, male, how do they differ?
Well, what's interesting is if you just Google like male friendship or you just Google female friendship, there's kind of like a narrative being told for each gender. If you type in male friendship, this is kind of what comes up. How to build and maintain guy friends. Men have fewer friends than ever. Why men's friendships can feel so empty. Bromance, male bonds and friendship. And lastly, men can have better friendships. So like right there seems to be this problem, apparently, that why don't guys have friends, or how do guys make better friends, or, how to build and maintain friendships for men. That's kind of like what I'm seeing out there. So I don't know if you, from the male perspective, can kind of jump in, kind of look at, examine, maybe give any insight as to what extent this is actually something that is really happening.
Yeah, well, it is, and like I could speak to it anecdotally, but also like research and surveys have identified that there is a decline. So the American Survey Center last year published some information. It just says that the number of friendships for both genders has declined over the last 30 years, but for men more so. And that article, as well as others I found in the Huffington Post, as well as the American Sociological Review, said that actually it's a little bit worse for single men, which I did not expect. But in general, like if you're white, single, heterosexual, single, and male, you have reported over the last 30 years fewer and fewer friendships.
Very interesting.
So, yeah, it reminds me of a movie called I Love You, Man. I didn't look up when this came out, but do you remember this movie?
I don't know that I've seen it.
It's basically about a guy who's going to get married, but he doesn't have any friends, so it's kind of the search for him to find a best man for his wedding.
Okay.
And it's worth a view. It's a comedy, but like it's kind of like
Sounds like a tragedy, but all right.
right. But if you think about like your classic, like in literature, there's a certain number of stories. This is like your quest story. Like a man goes out on a quest to find a friend, and it even though it's comedic, I think it does speak to kind of a real problem. We talked about this a little bit in part one, where like there's like almost like a strategy that you need to have, almost like when you're an adult and trying to find a girlfriend. Like there's similar thoughts and problems that come up with trying to find a guy friend as well. So there's a number of things that have contributed to this decline in the number of male friendships that are taking place, or that are that have any hold into adulthood. One thing that I'd like to explore with you is that how would we say it? Like the norms for men have changed, and like the domain, it used to be like the man's domain was outside of the home and the woman's domain was in the home. But that has changed over time as well, where now like much more of what's taking place inside the whole household, including like the marriage relationship itself, and if kids are involved, right, that has become much more of the responsibility of the guy, of the dad. So in a sense, like if there's just this opportunity cost, then like kids take precedence over friendships, and so there's a decline of time and availability for that. And that's why it surprised me when it said that single men actually have like report fewer friendships, because I was like, man, if I was single,
I'd have all this free time.
I'd have tons of free time just to go hang out with who I want to, when I want to. But because I want to be a good husband and a good dad first, just in addition to like maintaining a job and whatnot, then, friendship kind of slides down that list of priorities. But there are other factors. So you have a generation of men who are living with their parents for longer, like well into their 20s, even after they have a career that's beginning to be established. There is a lot more changing jobs and remote work. So if you think about where we tend to forge friendships, oftentimes, it's not exclusively, but it's oftentimes at the workplace. But when, like, thanks to COVID, right, and just technology in general, we can work remotely, which means that we can stay at home, and a lot of the like office cooler kinds of camaraderie is no longer there. The happy hour is no longer there because your coworker might be in Pennsylvania, and plus there's more changing jobs. We've talked about that before. People are moving much more, or as I read in the article, it said geographical transience.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, I just call it moving. But there's also, generationally, there's declining religious involvement, which is a common place where like people go to meet other people. And we'll talk about this a little bit more, but like just your affiliation with various institutions brings you in line with like other people that you can get to know. But because that involvement in the institution has declined, so has the friendship that often comes from that. Men are getting married later in life, which again I think would contribute to more friendship, but it doesn't. Marriage actually helps friendship to an extent. And then another big thing to talk through too, I know this is the last thing on my list here, is that men are caught in like an emotional conundrum where like being a guy, like being especially like having more overt masculine qualities like the alpha male or toxic masculinity is very frowned upon. But so is like men being emotional and being vulnerable with one another too. So it leaves them in sort of a emotional no man's land where it's difficult to even know like what frequency to tune into when you meet another guy.
Well, there's a lot there. That's a lot of layers.
So that's my list. I did see, I'll share this too before you chime in, but there were, I don't know if you saw this, in Saturday Night Live did you know how like there's a dog park where you bring your dog and it runs around and plays with other dogs. They did a parody on that and they called it a man park, where wives would bring their husbands to go like unite with other guys.
Meet other husbands.
Yeah. So I think one guy walks up to another guy and he's like, Star Wars, you know, and then they bond over that. The wives are like, oh, look. But it like all of that like does commentate on the fact that like men's friendships with other men are really fragile right now, really difficult to establish and maintain.
Well, and you know, there's other things in terms of like comedy. I mean, there have been many comics that said this. I think someone has said, kind of attributed this to John Mulaney, but it's like, I think that, you know, the greatest miracle of Jesus is that he had 12 best friends in his 30s and they weren't his wife's best friends' husbands, you know, that not turning water to wine, but like, how did this guy in his 30s, you know, doing all these great things, have 12 best friends
Jesus,
that followed him around?
He's an amazing guy. 12 friends in his 30s. How do you do it?
Real miracle. I think it's interesting. There's a lot there, like in terms of the shift of like the role of like, men, husbands, fathers, because when I think back to, I think one of my favorite shows, it has to be Mad Men. And you think, you know, what's nice is it's a period piece. So it's really commenting about like that time period.
It's in the 60s.
Yeah. Like late 50s into the 60s. And, you know, the men go to work all day, where it's a boys club. So it's just a bunch of men all together, you know, working in an advertising agency. And then they're meeting clients, right? So then they like have those kinds of relationships. And then they go out for drinks afterwards. And then there's those kinds of relationships. And then they're members of country clubs. And then, you know, they're golfing and they're swimming and they're really like, they get to, I don't want to say they get to do whatever they want, but like the woman's role is at home, right? With the kids. And even if the dad is gonna, you know, go out after work, he can go out after work and the mom is just home with the kids. And there's all of this time for men to kind of like do these manly things. So in addition to working and having those working relationships, it's, you know, that they're a part of these clubs or organizations or going out for guys' night or being a part of a bowling league or golfing or fishing, like whatever it is, they have all of this kind of time. But there is now a shift in what it looks like to be a husband, what it looks like to be a dad, a parent, a co-parent, whatever that is, where, you know, these men are now coming home to be involved and invested in the lives of their partners and their spouses and their children. And that has shifted because when we look at like relationships and friendships, you know, in, I don't know, season 1 or 2, we did an episode Face to Face and Side by Side. And we talk about how
I think that was season 1, episode 12 would be good to go listen to, everybody.
Yeah. That men generally have the kind of friendships that are side by side friendships. They don't sit over coffee looking longingly into one another's eyes, like expressing those deep emotions of like fear, resentment, or sexual frustration with each other. They go hit golf balls and go drive 18 holes. They go fishing. They, you know, they do things that require time where they're not necessarily expressing feelings or emotions, but they're spending time together building and forging friendships.
Yeah. This is echoed actually, like Amanda Rose from the University of Missouri, like specifically says that like men, their relationships tend to be more successful when they're activity based. So finding something to do. And there's actually a podcast episode on the art of manliness about friendship as well. And the guest on that episode says like men need somewhere to go, something to do, and someone to do it with. And that's kind of the ingredients for friendship. And I think I told this anecdote when we recorded that original episode in season 1, but it's worth repeating here that I remember I was helping a friend paint his house, and we were just silent, just painting. And the wife is like, you guys are like literally right next to each other. Why don't you like have some talk? Like, isn't this a nice time? And we're like, no, actually we're good. And there is like this bond that is formulated through a common action, more so I would say than through language. Language is still an important part of it. But like, I think that that's one thing that is harder to come by, is like finding the time and the opportunity and the right activities like to go like do with other people. Sometimes it's easy to like, hey, let's go grab a beer or go grab coffee, and that's not a bad idea. but that forces conversation and like diminishes activity. And so like I think that's a perfectly acceptable activity to do. But in general, what I would definitely enjoy more with any male friendship is the opportunity to go like do something together.
Right. So like when you go out with the guys, sometimes you guys are playing darts or you're shooting. Like there's like something that you're doing together, and then like the conversation just like ebbs and flows. But you're not there to like sit down and like have a chat. Like
Right.
you're gonna chat, you're gonna connect, you're gonna laugh and joke around and all of that. But like there needs to be something there that kind of helps.
Yeah, and you and I have said the same thing about our dates too. Like some dates are great if we like go have dinner, but then there's really nothing else to do but eat and talk. So if we combine that with activity, then it adds some substance to the relationship that way. So yeah, like some of the best times this past summer were like just going to golf, and it was nice like the different people I had a chance to do that with. Like you're just with somebody, you're just yourself, like enjoying a common activity, or even when I'm at the gym and just training with other guys, like having a like interest, like the relationships are kind of built through that, much more so than if I were to take any one of those individuals and then just sit down with them and try to like pry into their heart's longings and
Right.
you know.
Well, and so do you think that that's kind of like the secret or like the special sauce to building and maintaining friendships with men is just being in situations where you're doing things together that kind of breed like some kind of common ground or understanding. Like that's how you get to know someone from the male perspective, is not just like sitting down and saying, hey, tell me about your family or tell me about your job, or that it's kind of like bonding over some kind of activity or action or just proximity.
Yes. And I think that like in any relationship that is an important ingredient. But again, like none of that, like even if we in theory say, okay, that's what we should do, as we look at some of the norms for men, you're right. Like my objective in my day is to like work and then come home because the kids have activities and we have family dinner and you have things that like you also need to do. So I definitely see like work and home as my two primary domains. So then too, it almost feels selfish to say, hey, like I'm going to, instead of coming home from work, like I'm going to go out with so-and-so, or I have an appointment to go do this with these friends. So it's, there needs to be more of a conversation in each household about who are our friends, how much time are we spending investing in those relationships, and so on.
Well, and we talked about this in the previous episode a little bit about how like as we've gotten older, we spent so much of the last 12 years, just like all in with our kids and raising our kids. And I mean, we've got a long way to go. The youngest is 4. So we've got plenty of child rearing years ahead of us, but just kind of acknowledging that. Although I adore you and we get along and even we like to spend time with one another, we do realize that like it's good for me to spend time with girlfriends and it's good for you to spend time with guy friends. And then when there are those opportunities, even if I have things to do or even if you have other responsibilities, just kind of like encouraging other to like take that time, because what that does is kind of like refuel you in a sense. Like those relationships give you things that I cannot give you.
Yeah.
And vice versa. Like you need to like go out and play golf, and yeah, it's going to take a few hours, and I have to understand and get that. Now, can you do that if I'm working on a Saturday? No, you can't. So like, obviously that makes sense, but it's just like this acknowledgement of, all right, like I've got this going on. You've got this going on. Like, hey, why don't you, giving you the space to like have the freedom to build those friendships and to spend your time.
Yeah. And now that we're talking about, like, it feels almost easier. Like really like having someone home with the kids is the important part. And that's why it's so hard for you and I to like go out on a date, is because like, well, we need childcare for us to actually go out of the house without the children. But like, as long as you're home, then if I'm just sitting around or like, there's nothing that is essential, like I can go out, or vice versa. I'm like, I'm here. We don't both need to be sitting around. Like, why don't you go out?
Yeah.
Find a friend, phone a friend.
Phone a friend. So yeah, I mean, so the first step is really identifying who are those people that you do want to spend time with. And then, if you're a guy, then what do you want to be doing with them? Like it doesn't have to be this soft, sappy moment where you're sharing souls. It's just about going out and being with other people like-minded. But when we do talk about friendship in adulthood, like to me, it sounds like, based on what we've talked about in the previous episode and here, it's, why do people have less and less friends? Why is it so hard to maintain friendships? And part of this is because there are barriers in adulthood, So, some people will say that barriers to adult friendships can be distance, if you're saying that people are moving, what'd you call it?
Geographically transient.
Geographically transient populations. And, I think about a lot of the guys that you have grown up with, that you knew in high school and then went to college with, like, one has moved to Colorado, one has moved to, people just go, and so that just changes the dynamic of friendship. I think too, there's this, just kind of fear of rejection, fear of introversion, because if you don't have a lot of friends and you're like, all right, like I need to I want to make some friends, or I need to get out there more. It's like, it's hard to do that, And so who do I ask? Who's going to want to go out with me? And so it's just learning how to you meet someone, whether it's at your kid's soccer game or at a community event, and just be like, hey, you mind if I give you a call, or you want to meet up, or, and that can be hard.
Yeah.
It's easier when you're a kid. I was reading about why it's so easy for kids to make friends. And it's because they don't care. They don't have this history and this baggage of well, this person doesn't like me and this person does. Yeah. Oh, you like Spider-Man? Great. Now we're friends, and it's that easy. And sometimes we forget that it's that easy, and that sometimes people are just waiting for an invitation. So if you're not afraid to make the invitation, chances are someone will say yes.
Yeah. But it's an emotional labor too. Sometimes, if you have plans and then suddenly they get canceled for whatever reason, don't you feel sometimes okay, good, right?
I don't have to do this.
Right. But at the same time, once we actually get out of the house and we're going to something that is enjoyable in a way that's much more satisfying than just staying home alone or with our family on the couch or whatever.
Yeah. Some other people will report that some of the barriers to adult friendships are low trust. If you've been burned in the past, or if it's just hard for you to make friends, or it has been, or you haven't had a lot of friends, you think people don't like me, or I'm just not the kind of person someone wants to be friends with. And so we kind of talk ourselves out of it. But I really think that we're finding is that the biggest barrier to adult friendships is a lack of time. And it reminds me of something that your mom had said to me, probably 5 to 7 years ago. And it was because all of our kids were out of the house at that point. We were having kids, and so they were really small and never going out with friends. And she's like, we were you guys once. And you hate when your parents tell you these things because you're like, roll your eyes.
What do you know, Mom?
She's like, we
yes,
we were like you once, we had a bunch of friends, and then we started having kids, and then your kids become your life, and friends kind of are on the back burner. And we were kind of complaining because your parents were going on cruises. They were going to Europe. They had, bunko night and margarita night and going out to cooking classes and whatever. We're like, you're just living it up. She's like, well, now all of our friends, all of their kids are out of the house. They're all grown and flown. And now you're kind of reconnecting with people who have all of this time to put into their friendships because they don't have any other responsibilities besides maybe working and a few chores around the house. And so at the time I was like, man, okay, whatever. But now that I see that as, friendships were on hold for a while for us. And now we're kind of realizing they are important and we're going to need them to move forward, and that's with all kinds of friends, past friends, people we haven't even met yet, people who are a little bit older than us that know what it's like to parent teens. We've got that coming up. Even people that are younger than us that are in the stream a little bit more than we are, that we can kind of learn from. And so there's big pool of friendship that we do need. And I think sometimes we just forget how important it really is to make a priority.
Yeah. And that's what I saw too. Career and family life, really pick up when you're in your 30s, in the, right in your mid 30s. And we're right about to turn 40, and our kids will get older. So it is a phase. But I was still struck that single men still struggle with that as well. So there's obviously more to it than family obligations and marriage. And I think for men, it takes a degree of effort and navigating these kinds of relationships with new and possibly scary people until you get to that point where you can have a bromance.
Have you ever had a bromance?
I don't know. Like I would
Are you currently in a bromance?
know.
Okay.
I mean, I wouldn't mind that, but like,
I mean,
right.
I'd be down.
Yeah. And there are movies that and stories that idealize that. I think of like Frodo and Sam from Lord of the Rings. Right.
Okay, sure.
Although that's a little bit like Sam is a little bit more subservient to Frodo in that. But you just think about like two, I don't know, is bosom buddies the still in vogue? Just someone who gets you, who's not your spouse, that you like. You can, I think, like you could just be casual with. Like you get them, and they get you. Like your relationship already has like a degree of familiarity,
Comfort, yeah.
and flow to it. But that comes with time. So, but I was thinking about this, like when I was in college, I would say that I had like a bromance, so to speak, because I did room for all 4 years at college with my closest friends from high school. And like we were, especially in college, like you're just together all the time, like doing all the fun things and all the menial things together. But what I noticed is that like each of us had different girlfriends, and then the girls kind of became friends like by default. It's like we all have like the same boyfriends in common, so now we're friends too. I feel and that
Friends or friendly?
well, yeah, it was hit or miss, and I won't speak for them, but you know their relationships evolved differently. I feel like that's a little bit reversed, going back to John Mulaney's observation that he's like, your dad doesn't have friends. He has a wife. That wife has friends, and those wife's friends have husbands. And right, that's a little bit more how I see it evolving now, where at least between the two of us, you're the more socially proactive, right? You're connecting with people at the school and in the community and in business, and whoever like that friend's spouse happens to be, then like we end up hanging out like the four of us, or whatever iteration that ends up taking. And I think guys can pretty easily get along with anyone, like any other guy that's just normal and cool and whatever. And so that's what a lot of my relationships over the years have been, is kind of these local relationships where there's someone who you've gravitated towards or been more proactive in initiating, and then I've developed my own relationship with the husband as well.
Actually, I feel like that's more recent because, we've made friends with our kids' friends' parents. But we've talked about this with one couple that it's we win the lottery when it's like the husband likes you and the wife likes me, and it's like we all like each other, let's go out. Because oftentimes it could be that like you relate to a dad or I relate to a mom, but they're not married. It's like different kids' parents, and so it's like the ultra lottery when it's like all four. Hey, we could all four go out. Like it's kind of like fun and exciting, and I don't think we really let that kind of dictate who your friends are.
Well, it's not. It's not like a factor on the list that we have, so to speak, but it does evolve that way.
Yeah. Well, I think you brought up a good point. It's, you grew up with four guys. You guys were in high school together. You went to college together, and everybody ended up getting married, and everybody had a wife, and everybody gets along. But it's a different dynamic. Like the guys all get along, and that's fine. But the girls all get along, but the girls aren't all friends because they don't have that like shared experience or whatnot. So the commonality is that the husbands are friends. Yeah. So if we take that kind of just
I wanted to talk about women here.
Yes. So again, if you Google female friendships, these are like the top articles that you get. Why women's friendships are so complicated. Surviving female friendships, the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Well, surviving.
What science reveals about female friendship, the real key to why breakups happen. So those are like the top 3 articles that come up. So what we're saying here is that, the problem with female friendships is that they're complicated. And I feel like in being a female, it can be.
Do you agree with that description?
Yes, I think it can be, but it doesn't have to be. And so I was trying to figure out so why is this the case? First of all, women are just wired very differently than men. Just look at it in general. Like guys will, even if they're mad at each other, it's like, what do they do? They're like, okay, and then it's over. Like, it's just, guys just have this, like, nothing
maybe,
bothers them, phases them. It doesn't last long. They don't hold grudges. And I feel like women are not like that.
Well, this is between friends. Like, yeah, if you have a problem with someone who's not your friend, like that might manifest very differently. But you're talking about like if something were to come up with someone you would consider some degree of a friend.
Yes. So I was researching this a little bit. I don't have as good research and like thorough stats and all of this, but just kind of listening to some things and kind of looking at it. If you're looking at friendship in terms of women, like on a primal, instinctual, and hormonal level, there's a lot of like competition and jealousy. There's something about relationships between women where there's always been this like level of competition. And if you go back again, like instinctual, primal, it's like this competition for men, right? To like land a husband, competition for jobs. Like there didn't used to be room at the table for everybody. And so it was very like dog eat dog. If you look at, just think about like the way women are portrayed and the way that we're seen, like look at the Real Housewives. It's like football for ladies. It's brutal. They like tear each other's hair out and they scream and they're nasty and they're like.
I'd compare it more to like WWE for ladies, right? Because it is like this female drama, and it is reality TV. I mean, that's not that doesn't represent. At least I hope it doesn't represent like authentic relationships. Not on reality TV.
No, and it doesn't, but it can. And so. And I think that's where a lot of it stems from. It's like this jealousy, it's this competition, right? If you're on social media and you're looking, like you see this mom who has these kids and her house is clean and her hair is brushed and she makes bread and then instead of just being like, yeah, good for her. So like I think in general, just our own insecurities as women or feeling like we need to be like someone else or as good as or keep up with someone else often keeps women apart, or often drives a wedge between them.
Oh, like you see someone with some of those qualities and instead of being like, oh, like I'd love to spend more time with that person, it's like a degree of animosity builds up, right?
And insecurity.
I can't hang out with them.
Or she must think that she's, better than I am. And I really just feel like that just comes when you're younger and you're just kind of insecure and you're not sure. I think especially women, I mean, we're told that how we're supposed to be and what we're supposed to look like and what family should look like for us. And we're often found trying to navigate the waters of like what it means to be a good woman, wife, parent, all of it. And in that we get so many mixed messages and signals. And so when we're young and we're insecure and we don't have experience and wisdom, we're really not sure what to do with that. And oftentimes that leaves us, instead of uniting with other women or trying to like find commonality, it often puts a wedge between us and drives people apart.
So you said when you're younger, but I guess when you're younger, that's like, I think teens and maybe 20s, but now like the things you're describing are very also like family oriented and career oriented as well, which makes me think even like well into your 30s or maybe even present day, like as 39-year-olds, you still experience this.
Yeah. I mean, I'm thinking of too, like when I said younger, I was like thinking like late 20s, early 30s. But when you kind of bring that into play, like, I think about the dynamics of the girls at school, both the ages of our boys and then the ages of Juliet. And you kind of even just see like the girl dynamic and the division amongst girls and the us and the them and the haves and the haves nots and it starts very catty pretty young. Mm-hmm. About what you're wearing or not wearing, what you're doing or not doing. And it's like the us and the them. And, there's kind of always this, I don't know, this wedge that's always being built. And I think that starts young. And then I think the girls who get burned by that early then have trouble with friendships later on, right? There's low trust. They don't want to put themselves out there. They keep to themselves, which then they seem standoffish. So it might make it harder for them to develop those friendships.
I see a number of females who have like majority males as their friends. And sometimes I've heard them say like, it's just easier to be friends with guys. Where I don't see the reverse very often, right? You don't like, I just think of like Seinfeld or Big Bang Theory, where it was much more, it's like kind of a guy story with the female, like kind of playing into their world. But you see that in real life too. But you don't see the revert. You don't see the guy with like his closest confidants are like multiple females.
Well, and I think part of the thing to go back to is when we talked about what friendship is, we defined that in the part one, and it was people you're not in competition with, someone you can talk to with no judgment, someone who's on your side, someone you don't have to explain yourself to, and I think sometimes we lose sight of that, like this is someone I trust. I'm not in competition with her. Like she can parent one way, I can parent another. She can start her own business. She can stay home and homeschool her kids. She can work for a company, A lot of times it's when someone doesn't do what we do or how we think we should do it, like then comes judgment. And from that judgment, it kind of stirs from there. And then, things go wrong. And so when I think of female, relationships and what I'm teaching Juliet about friendship and what it means to be a good friend, and I just remember this now, every day when she leaves, there's things that I say to my kids when they walk out the front door for the bus. And every day I
don't act like a jerk at school, kids.
Well, for some people, I say that, sometimes it's have a good day, but for Juliet every day, and I'm just remembering this now, is that every day I tell her when she walks out, I look at her, I give her a kiss, I said, always be a good friend. Because it starts then, And so when I think of female friendships from, my 7-year-old daughter to now I'm 39, about to be 40, some things I think as women we need to remember is that gossip is garbage and so is drama. So we need to stay above the fray and feel free to walk away. Like if you're in a relationship with someone that's a lot of drama, it's a lot of gossip, it's a lot of negativity, like you got to walk away. I think something I've learned too is that we shouldn't knowingly leave people out. Not everyone is your best friend. Not everyone is the person you're going to walk through life with besides your spouse. And there is room for people. And so sometimes you do things in small groups and other times you invite people, and they don't have to be your very best friend to be a part of your friend group.
Maybe, although that gets a little convoluted too, because all right, in a guy's group, I feel like I could be with a group of guys and we could all get along. I feel like in a girls group, and this is just from observations over the years, sometimes there's some, I don't want to say like contention, but like there's like that feeling of sisterhood, right? That feeling of like true camaraderie isn't universal between the group. Like there might be that one person or multiple people who have said something or done something, or like their perception is a certain way that kind of puts a negative pallor across that interaction.
I'm more talking about like, all right, I've got like 2 or 3 close girlfriends. Okay, I can go out them each individually. Occasionally we may all get together, but also like I can invite a bunch of moms from the school out. Mm-hmm. What I'm saying, like I wouldn't invite someone that I have a problem with out, or someone who I know doesn't care for me or the way I do something. I'm just saying like, you can expand your circle. You can be open. You can leave an invitation. That's all I'm saying is we don't need to exclude people.
Well, it's interesting, like what's built up in our minds about people or the nature of our relationship with them versus the reality, right? Because you said like sometimes we make observations about others and then we imagine, even though it's not true, like what their attitude is towards us or how we wouldn't want to have a relationship with that person. But once we actually engage with them and they're like just another normal person, then we realize that there was a lot in our head that wasn't true, but it takes like the step to explore reality to actually confirm that.
Right. Also, as a woman, I think it's important to be yourself. I think sometimes we stress ourselves out so much about being like somebody else that we're not going to connect with people if we're not showing up as our true selves. And then ultimately, like our worth isn't determined by what somebody else thinks of us. And so I think just in female relationships, a lot of that comes into play. A lot of gossip, a lot of drama, leaving people out, excluding people, not being yourself, just all of it, like that we get so caught up in all of that it's not any kind of competition. That nobody is better than the other one, that there's 100 different ways to be a good mom or a good employee, and the judgment and all of that kind of builds up walls and barriers that make us feeling like we have to survive female friendship. And it can get tricky.
So women are judgy.
We're judgy, we're insecure, and not always, and not all of us are, but we're just very wired differently, and we can take offense easily, and that can kind of ruin relationships among women. But when we realize like she is her and I am me, and whether we're very different or exactly the same, like it is what it is.
So you're almost saying like we have to acknowledge that that is often the case in our sentiments towards others. But if we acknowledge that and we're aware of it, then we can rise above it as well.
Yeah. And what she does is no reflection on me, right? She makes more money than I do. She's more in shape than I do. Like that should not derail me or make me sour towards that person. You know, we're just like, okay, we're all just very different. Just like we have 4 kids, they're all very different. We love them all. They all have different strengths. They all have different weaknesses. They all drive us crazy for different reasons.
Yeah.
But if you are a friend, right, you love that person. It's someone who's on your side. It's someone that you have affection or esteem for. It's not because they do something a certain way. So I don't know. Those are just thoughts.
Yeah. Okay. So we want friends. Friends are good for us. There's some barriers to friendships. How do we get friends?
I don't know. What would you say?
So I was thinking about this, and I know we listed a couple of things. I added this because I feel like it just makes sense, and it could work. You know, like when you're in high school and you're encouraged to join clubs and activities and sports, and then
Try 'em on.
a lot of your friends like emerge from that. I think that's the same thing. Like if you just like go out into the world and you're like, all right, I need a friend. Oh, there's a guy. Let me go, engage with. That's weird. But if you're already partaking in something that you enjoy, then you're going to meet other people who enjoy that same thing, whether it's campaigning for a politician or like going out to the gym, or if it's a coworker, right? Like you're already intersecting with people. So that's probably the easiest and best spot to start. And then, like I've told you, like there's people that I've been training with at the gym, and they're like gym friends. But like there's a few of those people that I even like just click with a little bit better than others. And so it wouldn't be outlandish to say, hey, like let's go get a bite to eat, or let's go get drink. And like, or I've been invited to like birthday parties of theirs, for example. And it's like just, you don't dive headlong into these relationships, but like slowly and intentionally like open up that ground with the people who you feel like you have that connection with.
And I think that's the important thing to acknowledge is like friendship is a long game, right? In the first episode, we talked about like how many hours it takes to like really build a friendship. And so, any relationship you start has the possibility of blossoming into some kind of deeper friendship, but that does take time. It also takes effort, right? It takes putting yourself out there. And so like there are those opportunities. And I think finding those organic opportunities where it's like, all right, we already have something in common that we enjoy. Like when you have the nerve to like extend a hand.
That's just Rosanna hitting her microphone
Sorry,
for the 10th time.
with my hands flailing. But yeah, kind of like taking that one step further. And not everyone will be, a best friend or in the inner circle, but you need different types of people. And so, yeah, you might have your gym friends or your church friends or your work friends. But then those people start to emerge from there as like you have more in common than just that one thing.
So I have another thing here, and I don't know if this is a good recommendation or not. But this is very hard for me. I would say utilizing texting and social media more. Right, because there's a lot of downtime between my opportunities to actually see the people that I want to hang out with. And usually in that downtime, at least for me, there's almost zero electronic interaction with. And I'm not a big texter. And sometimes I don't just want to like text for the sake of texting, but I contrast that to you. And I feel like there's daily, hourly interactions with a lot of the people that you're still connected with. And so maybe it's not that disproportionate between us, but
hourly. Okay. Take it easy. Yeah. But when I think of something or like something is funny and it like relates to something that like a friend and I have like shared, or like I try and share that because it's a way to connect and just be like, I'm thinking about you, or to make someone laugh. Like I'm a little bit more like extroverted in like the way that I love people. And you're a little bit more.
Well, I'll be extroverted in person, but just digitally, right? I'm not liking people's posts or like I'm not going to think of like see a video or a reel that I'm then going to forward to my friend. That just doesn't cross my mind, and it doesn't cross my friends' minds either because they're not sharing that with me. So there goes like a lot of like digital lulls into like a text or a phone call or a run-in that says, "Hey, like let's get together."
Okay.
So I don't know how to what extent that should play a role, but it strikes me as at least a useful tool that I could use.
Do you have anything else?
Just be more vulnerable. Just be real. Sometimes we're guarded. So when you are interacting with someone, when you share something that's honest, chances are they're probably thinking or feeling something similar, depending on what it is you're being honest about. So I think that especially for guys can go a long way.
Okay. Well, yeah, and I think I mean, last night I was worked a wedding, sitting down to dinner with the vendors. And it's funny because when I meet couples, they're strangers and it's like a first date. We have to like have a call or a meeting and, so I've actually gotten good at like, just trying to like connect with people, hit the mic again. And now I'm trying to even like connect with other people that I work with, these vendors. It's like how I'm building my business. So like even just sitting down last night and like trying to get this group of guys talking, some were easy to get talking and some were not. But, like just sharing about like, oh, are you guys like married? What is it that you do? Do you do this full time? Just trying to like open those doors of communication. And what's interesting is like we found a lot of like commonalities and common interests. And I was like, gosh, now I really want to like talk to this guy about X, or I want to connect him with you because like he knows about stuff with like podcast and media and YouTube and whatever. And so like that's not like in my nature to do. People would say that I'm extroverted. I really don't think that I am, but it's a skill and it has to be kind of like learned, and then you have to continue to try it. And so do I always hit it out of the ballpark? I really don't. But I think by putting yourself out there, even putting yourself in circles that you wouldn't normally, and being vulnerable is really helpful.
Yeah. All right. So those are some tips. Anything else from your end?
No. I'm curious to see what people think about this conversation about like male friendships, female friendships, what gets in the way, if there's any truth to this. Yeah. Men don't have any friends, or friendships among women are complicated, and what they think.
Can you all relate?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's worth talking to your spouse too. And like we were talking about, like, especially for married folks with kids, right? Make that time and room for one another. And we've said that about a lot of things over the show, but it might be worth it to say like, hey, like you haven't actually gone out socially in a while. There's no point in just sitting around here. Why don't you see if so-and-so is available and go do something?
Yeah. You know what? I think it's just good. There's a lot of ways to fill your own bucket, to fill your own cup. And while I can do that for you in some ways, there's other ways that I can't. So like, you kind of have to acknowledge that too. Like you need different people in your life for different reasons: to blow off steam, to have fun, to laugh, to commiserate with about, parenting and marriage or work and stress. And so, it's not always going to be the same person. Sometimes you need different people in your life, to kind of help with like mood and health and mental health and all of that well-being.
Yeah. Right, so we got through it. 2 episodes about friendship. We were nervous. I especially was maybe more nervous going in, but this is an area that I personally would love to develop more intentionally, because on the list of priorities, it's fallen lower, but it is meaningful, even though it's hard, especially at this time of life.
Yeah.
All right, so like we said at the beginning, hopefully you enjoyed and got something out of this conversation. Let us know what you thought and share it with a friend, and or leave a review for us, everybody. We're looking forward to more coming up in season 8, and we have a few exciting guests. We're both going to turn 40 in the near future, and we're celebrating our 100th episode at the end of this season in December. So any thoughts, any questions, any feedback, anything you would like addressed in that 100th episode, please send our way. The best way to contact us, Rosanna?
I don't know. What is the best way for people to contact us?
Instagram. We are at The Relentless Pursuit Podcast on Instagram, or you can send us an email, Jordan or Rosanna, at therelentlesspursuitpodcast.com.
All right, guys. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you again next week.
Love you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks so much for listening to today's show. We hope you will use this conversation as a starting point for your own. We hope you're encouraged to think and act more intentionally.
If you want to learn more, you can visit our website, therelentlesspursuitpodcast.com, where you can find notes on today's show, plus additional blog posts, and you can subscribe to our free members list.
Please subscribe, leave a review, and share with your friends.
Facebook and Instagram are two great places to connect with us for daily doses of our quotable quotes, behind the scenes, and real-time photos, videos, and challenges.
Until next time, let us know how you are taking life off autopilot
And relentlessly pursuing what matters.